Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. Pleased to see all of you here for our event today with Helen Hirsh Spence. I would like, can you put up the slides, Aaron, while you're letting people in? While we're waiting for everybody to arrive, please go in the chat and let us know your name. Well, I guess your name may be there, but let us know your location. We want to know where you are. And also one word or phrase that is reflective of why you're here today, what your interest is in the topic today. That'll help us get started. So your location, your affiliation, if you want to be connected to other people in the session today, also include your email or your LinkedIn profile. Lots of people like to get connected that way. Next slide. My name is Doug Dixon. I'm secretary and co-founder of the Encore Network, and happy to be your host today. There are a couple of things that I want you to pay attention to as we begin our program today. One is to keep yourself on mute. I think the reason is obvious. There's always inevitably a barking dog or a ringing phone or something in the background, which is unfortunately distracting to our presenter and also to others. We want you to use the chat, which for comments or questions. For questions that you want to address to Helen, it would be very helpful if you put a Q or the word question in front of your question, and that will help us pick it out of the other comments and so on that are in chat. And finally, we are recording the session today. We'll be sending out a recording along with all of the resources and so on that will be mentioned during Helen's presentation today. So with that, I want to briefly introduce Helen. Helen has a new book out called ReSet, Making the Most of the Rest of Your Life, and she'll be talking about that in her work today. She is founder of Top 60 Over 60. She is a lifelong educator and ended her education career, maybe began her education career as headmistress of a school, and has also served on many boards, including Jane Goodall's board, the one focused on environmental action. And she also serves as vice chair of the Encore Network board. So she's very busy in all aspects of her life. We're pleased to have her here today asking this very provocative question: what has ageism cost us? Something that we don't often think about in a personal way. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to you, Helen.
Great, thank you. You can get rid of the slide, I think. Great, thanks very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak today with this group. As Doug said, I started my career as a teacher actually in Munich, Germany, in the 1970s. So I'm a product of the 1940s. I was born in 1949. I'm proudly approaching my 77th birthday in less than 2 months. And I do say that proudly because I've begun to really claim and own my age, because I think it's really important that we help others recognize that the second half of life is as meaningful as the first, if not more so. The reason I got into the work that I did, so I was a secondary school principal in the public system here in Ontario. I was the head of a girls' school. And then I helped found what's known as the Ontario Principals Council. And I was on its founding executive and the president of it, the fifth president. And then at the end of that time and the end of my period as a head, I decided that I wanted to go back to the world of travel, but at the same time, I wanted to offset my carbon footprint. So I embarked on joining a number of different international organizations where I used my expertise, my skills, or whatever, in a variety of different ways. In Honduras, it was with communications. In the Arctic, it had to do with governance, with youth. In Bolivia, it had to do with leadership development with a Baha'i university. I learned and speak 4 languages fluently, which really helped. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to travel, so that I could use them. And my husband, quite frankly, is not interested in traveling. He's my partner of 49 years, so there are a lot of times when I did things on my own. And then I hit my late 60s, having been chair of Jane Goodall and having had numerous leadership experiences. And I started losing my self-agency, my confidence. I had lots and lots of energy and enthusiasm, but I didn't feel like I was regarded the same way as I used to be. You know, I'd go to parties and people didn't want to talk to me in the same way as they used to. I don't know if this is resonating with any of you. They didn't necessarily seek me out for information the way they used to. There were a number of little things that started irking me, let's put it that way. At the same time, I was always in touch with a number of former students of mine, and one of whom became like a mentee. I mean, I've known her since she's 14 years old. She's now 34. And she said to me, Mrs. Spence, why don't you come to Toronto and come with me to the Social Innovation Center? I didn't know what that was. I had no idea. And she introduced me to social entrepreneurship. So I started taking courses, and it was that prompted me to think, oh, maybe I could do something else. Simultaneously, I listened to a Canadian broadcasting company interview on the radio in which I heard somebody describing very much the way I was feeling. And it was attributed to something called self-directed or internalized ageism. That's when the aha struck me. That's when I realized that what I was experiencing really wasn't my own doing, but it was something external to me that was happening, and that I had actually internalized all of those beliefs and narratives about aging that really didn't belong to me, but that I had heard ever since I was younger. So I launched an organization called Top 60 Over 60. And what we did is promoted courses for organizations, but also for individuals, and one of which was designed for the Ontario Workforce Innovation Center. Got a grant to develop a program to prove that self-directed ageism actually interfered with the entrepreneurial mindset of older adults. And what we did is we created a month-long program, but only over 3 or 4 days for participants. And it's the basis of the book that we wrote and I wrote it with Debra Yearwood. Some of you may know her, because it was so eye-opening for the participants that we decided that it would make sense if we actually expanded the reach of this program, including some of the strategies that we introduced into the program for other people. So in other words, we started off with the premise, and we had 50 participants between the ages of 55 and 75 who knew nothing about ageism and who knew nothing really about the entrepreneurial mindset, which I refer to as a growth mindset on steroids. It has different competencies and whatever, but essentially you're looking at a lot of the same ideas and concepts. We introduced a whole day on ageism, helping people recognize what it was all about. And then we introduced these competencies and these strategies, and we practiced them. At the end of the session, there were independent researchers who did the actual research and evaluation. A paper was published in which we obviously reached the audience, and it was highly successful. So, as I say, we embarked upon writing a book. Now, this book really is very different from the course. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. So at the core of this book, the proposition is that really the second half of life is a powerful stage that we have not really taken advantage of. And the reason we haven't is because of ageism primarily. And for those of you who I know are mostly familiar with what that means, I'm referring to the bias, this discrimination, and the stereotype based on age. And although ageism goes both ways, we focus on older adults. And in this book, because we wanted the audience to be North American, I have equally as many stats in there that pertain to the United States as to Canada. And it's a little bit different because most books don't have very many Canadian statistics, but we do, being Canadian. So we explored in the first few sections of the book's divided into 4 sections. We look at the origins of ageism, essentially. And here we take a really deep dive. There are about 30 pages of references. So this is really a research-based book, as well as very practical. And from what I see from the reviews, also very accessible to audiences, because you can take the second part of the book, which are largely strategies and competencies and self-reflections and tools that help you rewrite the narrative that you want for the future of your life, which is making the most out of the rest of your life. So that's the framework, essentially. Going back to the ageism section, we go into quite a bit of detail identifying our new longevity, the bonus that we have thanks to medical and technological advances. And we also talk about what's necessary to sustain that. But we also spent a lot of time talking a bit about age segregation, which really only came about at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, when looking at age as a divider for schools, for work, for marriage. There are a number of bureaucratic reasons why, but the reality is that we only started during the Industrial Revolution to take pains to keep children out of workplaces. And that's really the very beginning of when we start recognizing what adolescence is, because that's a new concept as well that was only developed in 1904, and recognize that there's a difference between childhood, adolescence, and then adulthood. In the early 1900s, we had the start of Social Security. And at that point, we were looking at 65 as being that magical retirement number. And the reason for that was that the average lifespan at that point was 62. At the start of the 20th century, it was 47. Already by about 1940, the average lifespan was 62. But the reality is that today, our average lifespan in the United States is the late 70s, and Canada is the early 80s, and it's just extending. Yet all of the institutional, structural practices are still wrapped around that 20th century concept of learn, earn, retire at 65. Age segregation is something that came about in the 1950s. So if you go back and look really carefully at post-World War II, that's when the largest growth spurt of births existed. So the boom generation, obviously, of which I am a part, although I'm not into labels because I really believe in stages, but it applies. So we had economic growth, we had tons of young people, we had marketing and advertising and media. Everything was oriented around a youth-dominated culture. And that's really the origin of age bias. Prior to that, elders were revered. There weren't very many generations alive at the same time. There were only 2, possibly 3, compared to today where we have 6 generations. So all this to say is that ageism is a structural concept. It's something that was outside of ourselves. It's cultural, it's structural, and it was brought into being basically because of capitalism, and it's been kept alive for the same reason. If you look at the anti-aging industry, it's a booming industry. It depends on most of us, and mostly women, believing that the only way in which we can keep our value is by looking youthful, looking younger, looking good, looking not with gray hair, let's put it that way. Those are the realities. And unfortunately, ageism isn't personal, but it is personally acquired and affects us in many different ways. I'm just going to check to see if there's something I wanted to mention. I think another thing that might be of relevance to many of you is if you heard about Sun City in the 1960s, because of our youth culture and the focus on, young people growing up, becoming older adults, it became fashionable also to create these retirement communities. Del Webb created one in the 1960s. It was called Sun City outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And people started gathering in those places and thinking this was a phenomenal new opportunity. The reality is now we know this is just another extension of age segregation. It's called spatial segregation. And that was extended as time flew by into the 90s and the 2000s with retirement homes, retirement residences, nursing homes, and care facilities for older people. In other words, we started hiving off older generations and putting them away for a lot of valid reasons too. I'm not saying that some of them aren't good ideas either, but the reality is we started segregating society. What we see now happening more and more because of our expanded lives is that children are coming home very often after college or university, sticking around longer, and then perhaps going into homes, marriages, whatever. But all of those things are also hampered by economic situations, cost of living, and so on. So this book is very, very positive, focused really on longevity and the opportunity that exists if we recognize what ageism is all about and what it has done to us individually. I don't know, Doug, if there are any questions that have come up at this point or not.
No, but there's a question that we've dropped into the chat.
I can't see it, so you'll have to tell me.
There's one subtle message about aging that you absorbed growing up from family, school, work, or media.
Right. That would be great. If you could put that in the chat, or did you dropped it in?
In the chat. That just went in the chat.
Thank you. So if those of you who are listening to this could participate by answering some of the questions in the chat, it will really enhance the conversation. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that. And Doug, maybe then you can take a look at some of the others.
Wendy says, my mom's mantra wasn't so subtle. Getting old sucks.
Right.
I've never subscribed to that.
That's fortunate, yeah.
And Megan says aging equals deterioration and to be avoided at all cost.
Right. Anything else? So essentially, I mean, go ahead.
Movies showed older adults as either grouchy or grumpy, or frail or helpless.
So I think, the message that we've all received, if we are of my generation or even Gen X, is that aging means decline. That narrative is so pervasive in absolutely everything that we see. The thing is that although it's structural, we internalize it. So it's really difficult to understand the difference between what our thoughts are, where they come from. But I am curious to find out from you, what are some, I think we have another prompt there that has to do with, a message that you may have inherited through media or something. Don't we have, I think I put a prompt in about that. What's one? Yeah, we said with that, that's the one that you just put in. Sorry. Okay.
We have some more responses.
Okay, let's hear them.
One is my parents organized family reunions, which always spent time hearing great aunts and uncles share their stories. We were shown the value of staying in relationships that were not always easy, but enriched our lives with time. Gerard talks about generational differences. Older generations can't understand us, quote unquote. And that my value is being a youthful worker for 35 years, and I had better not lose that edge.
So, I mean, there's a real issue here in terms of understanding what ageism really looks like. And I'd like to ask, again, for you to give examples. I mean, there are, and if you want, I can mention a couple that are really, really obvious, but they're everyday kinds of situations that we encounter, whether it's at a checkout counter where somebody uses a diminutive term to describe who we are, like dear or honey or something like that. It could be another individual that we encounter in the street who sort of starts rolling their eyes when we give an answer to a question. Look at the birthday cards that are out for sale. I know that there's a real push on right now for less, well, they're humorous, but they're not necessarily detrimental. But most birthday cards that are funny have an ageist message. You know, if you look at birthday candles on a cake and somebody with a fire extinguisher putting them out. If you think about some of the messages that you get working, and so employment is another place in which we see tons of ageism. We go into all of these factors, but as I say, half the book is dedicated to understanding how ageism is structural, not personal, although we take it personally. And the second part of the book is about strategies to build you up and to work on, rewriting what it is you want to become.
Helen, Norman mentions an article in today's New York Times that says that there are more older adults starting to be featured in TV stories and TV shows and movies. And I saw that article. I hadn't read it yet, but it also mentions that they're being portrayed in much more realistic ways than has perhaps been the case in the past.
Okay, so I mean, that's a great, great example of how the tide is turning. Why? Because who has the wealth? It's the older generation. 3/4 of the United States wealth is in the hands of boomer generation, and that transfer is now taking place. Finally, advertisers and marketers, and this has only happened in the last 2 or 3 years, have started to recognize the fact that they've been marketing to the wrong audience because young people, unfortunately, don't have as much money and there aren't as many. If you look at the realities of today's world, in the United States, you have 12 or 13,000 people turning 65 every single day. In Canada, we have 9 million. So almost 1/4 of the population by 2030 will be over the age of 65. The fastest growing group in age category I'm talking about are those over 85. That's the new reality. That's about longevity. And finally, capitalism is catching up. Essentially, ageism, which I didn't realize till I started doing this research, was only a term coined by Robert Butler in 1968. That's very recent. And the only reason why was because he started seeing it systemically and started studying it. But again, to re-emphasize that ageism is taken personally and has huge impacts on individuals, on communities, on families, on society, and especially on the economy. In the United States, there have been estimates made that amount to trillions of dollars of lost productivity because so many older adults are let go. Unfortunately, at this particular point in time, many businesses still do not understand that those myths about older adults have been disproved, and that older adults, especially when combined with multi-generational workforces, are infinitely more productive and have greater return on investment. But these are all the kinds of messages that need to be emphasized, and it's only by people such as ourselves, the people in this community, and others who are listening or reading books like this, who are going to turn around the narrative and prove that, in fact, the second part of life, and I just say second part of life or second half of life, because we're looking at a 100-year lifespan at this point, do have the competencies, the knowledge, the expertise to carry us further. And there's ample evidence, especially in the book, to prove that. The problem is that the people who are making the decisions, the people who are coding AI these days for job applications, are not necessarily reflective of those opinions and are not necessarily older adults. They are young people who still think that, and I'm not anti-youth at all, please don't misunderstand. It's just I would like to see age equity come into the conversation, and that's what we're really pushing for. Are there other comments that are...
The second question you wanted to put to the group is, if ageism had never shaped your path, what might look different in your life today? What did ageism make you think or shrink? What did ageism made you shrink, delay, or silence? And we have some responses to that. Do you want me to go ahead and...
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, yeah.
The reality is that some older adults do get ill and have problems, but that's not the majority. And there are things that we can do to stay in good health.
Well, there are more things, I mean, just to that point, there are more things that we can do at this point than we ever knew about before. 90% apparently is genetic in terms of our longevity. Sorry, I got it wrong. 90% is environmental. Only 10%. Only 10%.
Say again? Yeah.
Only 10% is genetic.
Please mute yourself if you're not on mute.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd get the most important statistic wrong, right? Or backwards. The reality is we have a ton of control, and there's more and more evidence. Longevity is not just referring to the number of years anymore. I think somebody needs to be muted, right? No luck. Anyway, and so the reality is that we have a lot of control. I mean, we've known about diet, we know about lifestyle and whatnot. What I think that most people do not understand has to do with the attitude, the mental attitude that influences how we age, how well we age, how long we live. Becca Levy had a book out and has done extensive research on this, in which she says, with a positive attitude towards aging, we can live 7.5 years longer. Her more recent research has shown that later in life, we can also improve cognitively and physically. That's something that's relatively a new understanding. So in other words, we don't necessarily decline physically or cognitively. We can do a number of things to enhance our cognition and our physical ability late in life. And by that, she's looking at, 70s and 80s still. So sorry, I interrupted. Doug, you said there were some other comments. I'd like to hear what they are.
Well, there are a number of comments, and calling out ageism is, when we see it, is a good thing to do. My question is, what are I think there's a missing word here. What are the I can't figure I can't figure that. I'm sorry. If you
Maybe the
want
person
to, yeah, Marissa, if you want to, or Maritza, if you want to restate that question, that would be helpful. As an adjunct faculty, I could imagine a situation where I receive steady work, a state pension, through my 70s. Haha is the comment there. When I apply for a job, the hiring manager is my daughter's age. I don't believe they can perceive hiring and working with someone their parents' age. They cannot see the value in experiences they have not lived. And that is my bias, says Andy.
It's true. I mean, it is a bias, but it's their bias and your bias. And working through that once you get in the workplace is really the responsibility of whoever the lead is or the director. And unfortunately, that happens to be one of the major issues that exists in the workforce today, is that there isn't enough work done on communication across generations, because we always find that there's more in common, that people of all ages have more in common than differences.
Maritza is clarifying her question, and that is, what is the first step to take in changing the ageism mindset?
Exactly. Thank you for the question. As I say, the very first step is awareness. And we started talking about, everyday ageism. There's so many different types of ageism. I don't know how many of you are familiar with, for instance, elder speak, the way in which older adults are addressed, whether it's by a physician who is examining them, or somebody who's a healthcare worker who's recommending some kind of treatment. If that person ever attends with an advocate, the doctor or healthcare worker very often speaks to the advocate as opposed to the person directly. And that tends to diminish individuals. All of these messages are very subtle. They are not obvious. And they're not always meant to be hurtful either. Just like the comment that you look good for your age. I know that's a backhanded comment that people make all the time to people. However, the result is, aging, I'm not so sure if that's a good thing, So again, it's one of those comments. But going back to elder speak, you'll see in institutional care where a caregiver will come to an older person and speak baby talk to them, like, what do you want? Would you like your blankie? Is your tummy hurting? Those kinds of remarks are all very diminishing to the person who receives them. It just accumulates. All of these things tend to accumulate. And so we have to be really mindful, as I say, of our body language when we're talking to older people who are perhaps hard of hearing sometimes. Well, maybe they have hearing aids, then you don't need to raise your voice. Or when it comes to technology, making comments like, giving somebody advice about how to use a cell phone when they actually know perfectly well how to use it. There are all sorts of very, very small comments. So as I say, it really has to do with becoming aware of what these look like. I think in the work world, we see frequently cultural fit in advertisements, or, we want young people. We'd never say we want young people because there'd be a discrimination suit. However, when you say cultural fit, that's really just another way of saying we want individuals who are probably younger, or we want enthusiasm and energy. All of those are words that are used to, show that you're intending the reader to be somebody who's younger. And we also know that ageism is particularly hard on women. Gendered ageism is rampant, and that's evidenced especially in the workforce, but it's also evidenced even today when somebody is beyond the workforce. Just think about the way in which our taxes are. I think they're the same in the States as in Canada, that when you have couples, you can declare your taxes as a couple. But if you're a single person, for instance, a widow or widower as well. But gendered ageism hits women at a much younger age, at about 45. It's sometimes referred to as lookism. If a woman looks older, she gets some kinds of messages from colleagues saying, "So when are you going to retire, Helen?" I mean, people get those kinds of comments all the time. Those little remarks are ageist, and what they do is they serve to reinforce that negative narrative about aging. So to go to the question about what can we do, first and foremost, we really have to become familiar with the varieties of ageism that exist, and then we have to counter them in a variety of different ways, depending on what the situation is. I often make comments to people to let them know that I realize that the remark wasn't intended to be ageist, but it is. I have friends who say, "Oh, I can't find where my keys are. I must be having a senior moment." And if they're close enough friends, I chastise them and say, you can be 30 years old and lose your keys as well. It's not just a question of aging, but there are all sorts of symptoms that we have in society, cultural messages that don't serve us well. And we need to recognize what they are, and we need to counter them. And that's really looking at the cost of what I'd really like people to try to think about, even if they don't write it down, think about what they may have stopped doing because they thought they were too old to do it, or what they didn't start doing because they thought they were too old, whether it was to take dance class or to learn a new language or to travel extensively. There are all sorts of issues that arise because that internal narrative is negative. And how do you change it to something positive? Is looking at what I call a longevity mindset. Are there any other comments there? So I can just take a break for a sec?
Sure. Norman reinforces your point about the first step being awareness, so that you can sort of create the counter narrative, right, of aging both to ourselves. Right. There also, Steve mentions lifespan versus health span. Is that
right?
You want to?
Sure. So lifespan is really the chronological length of our life, the number of years we live. Health span really refers to the number of years that we live in good health with our longer life. So in my opinion, lifespan without health span is useless, because who wants to suffer for the last 10 or 15 years of their life? And those are the areas that we do have some control over. Although I understand that chronic disease and other things, accidents and so on, happen, and we don't have control over those things. But what we do have control over is our mindset. We choose what it is we want to believe about what we can do. And we can rewrite that narrative by deciding what it is we want. In the book, what we do is we go through, the second half of the book is all about what can we do about changing the narrative. How do we think differently? Spotting opportunities, being creative, optimism, persuasion. We spend a lot of time on self-awareness because we know that that's foundational for any change that has to take place. But if we can't name the narrative that's affecting us, we can't rewrite it. So we need to really consciously pay attention to who we are at this particular point in time and what has influenced our thinking about growing older. And for many of us, it's been largely, the media, television, advertising, but also, the cultural stories that we've grown up with, or what we've seen happen to other members of the family, where they end up going, and so on. We need, however, as Norman also says, is be really critically aware of what they are. As I say, and women, because of gendered ageism, which is a combination of sexism and ageism, really do deal with the double whammy. Because if you look at people who are fortunate enough to have pensions, women are typically, I'm talking again, traditionally the ones who stayed at home and who took care of children. They're also the ones who sometimes stop working because of taking care of older adults in their family or siblings or spouses. So they lose out at the beginning of careers very often because they only step in later. And they also lose later on in their careers because they have to stop earlier. They don't get parity to begin with. We know that women only earn like 87 cents to a dollar that men earn. There are all sorts of issues around, as I say, sexism and gendered ageism that really, really impact especially older women. And we know that one of the largest groups of people who are in poverty in older age tend to be older women, which is, again, as a result of the way in which history has evolved. But we are now at a stage where we can look at a completely different map of life. And that doesn't mean just at the end of life. So this book is really relevant to people who are 50 and older, but it's also significant for people who are younger to help them understand they don't have to do things the way we did. In other words, we don't have to work until we're 65. We can take sabbaticals, gap years, and move out of the workforce and move back in with what's referred to as portfolio careers. This new map of life, it makes for opportunity for everybody along the age continuum. It's especially important for those of us who are older to take advantage of it whenever we can, which I feel like I embody that because I'm the age I am. I started something new at age 67. I'm writing books, I'm doing TED Talks. I firmly believe that we have to get this message about aging out into the wider world so that people understand that the narrative has changed and that there's tons of strength, possibility, creativity, and productivity as we age. But it's something that I didn't believe until I started looking into it myself because I didn't know. And I believed what I had heard growing up.
So
go ahead.
Oh, there's another question.
Yeah.
Hold on, I need to get back to it. That you wanted to put to the group, and that is, what's one action you can take in the next 7 days to challenge age bias in yourself, your workplace, or your community? And while people are responding to that, there's a question. I have to get back to it. I'm concerned with how AI may reinforce ageist beliefs, both cultural and within institutional systems. This has certainly been the case in the US in the very recent history. Any ideas about how to combat this?
Well, there is so much evidence that that's the case. And I think that what's happening is that organizations or the platforms are beginning to recognize that this is really going to be a problem, especially with an aging population, that hopefully they're going to start recruiting and using older people as well to start coding and doing things. There's a lot of conversation around this at the moment. AI and aging. It is reinforcing the negative bias at the moment, but it's AI is changing so rapidly. I can only be optimistic that it's going to be addressed as we move forward and as there's pushback for all sorts of reasons that we've mentioned before.
Here's an interesting comment from Rosemary, who says, although I don't feel I have experienced age discrimination and have created many new organizations and businesses over my life, I find now at age 87 that my mindset veers between feeling that maybe it's time to relax and enjoy myself and the feeling that I would like to create a new business. It's hard to let go of the entrepreneurial mindset. How do you suggest that Rosemary resolve this?
Well, I know how successful Rosemary has been and continues to be, so I'm not surprised. the best advice I would give anybody is simply, first of all, I hope you've enjoyed and loved doing what you've done in the latter part of your life. And I would hope that if you were interested in continuing to do something, that you do it, but at a different pace, perhaps. I mean, I do find that I slow down. I can't do quite as much as I used to do. And it's about pacing yourself. I don't see anything wrong with continuing, but I do think that you need to take care of yourself and also, smell the roses before it's too late. But I think that I'm smelling the roses all the time, just having an opportunity to talk to people such as this audience about something that I'm passionate about and what that I want to share, so that people understand clearly that what they're experiencing to a large extent is not something that they should be ashamed of, but it's something that they inherited by virtue of ageist beliefs, and that we can change that whole narrative in time. Things are changing really quickly now. Nobody talked about longevity. Nobody talked about mindset. We didn't recognize clearly that having an optimistic outlook about aging actually has been proven to help you heal faster, not succumb to as much chronic disease. It does not. It lengthens your lifespan. All of that is psychological. We have control. There's the one thing we have control over is, in fact, that internalized self-directed ageist belief system. So if we can be aware of it, we can do something about it, and we can make other choices so that, in fact, we don't hinder what our future is going to look like. Ageism has really stolen the future from so many people. It's handicapped them without them even realizing it. And I'm sure you all hear people making comments all the time about, well, I don't know if I can really do that because, I have arthritis and it hurts and so on and so forth. But you can do something about it. And as I say, if you can't play golf, maybe you can find something else that you can do that gives you pleasure, and that you continue to learn and grow, because that's what this whole longevity revolution is about, is, lifelong learning, long life learning, growing, and opportunity. And that's the message that has to start permeating the media, but it hasn't as of yet. Not really, anyway.
Norman suggests intergenerational activities as often as you can.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that's more meaningful. During COVID, Top 60 hosted conversations across generations, and we had people tuning in from across the world, and very many young people. And the message that they had for us was that they welcomed the opportunity to talk to older people, but they were intimidated, generally speaking, about starting conversations. But if you structure it in such a way that they're invited into the conversation, they will gladly participate. And more, I think we're beginning to recognize the value of having multi-generational households again. For many people, it's by default, not by design. They cannot afford, perhaps, to put an elder into a home or a residence, and they're building an extra space for them, or else it's the parents who have the space and they're bringing in the children and the grandchildren again. There was a richness, and we know that from our Indigenous communities, that elders have traditionally been respected, revered, and worshipped, and that those stories that were told to the children had lasting meaning. For any of us who've had the good fortune of having grandparents, we know that it makes a difference, and the research has shown that we have better relationships with older people if, in fact, we were introduced to them naturally when we were younger. Unfortunately, already at the age of 3, children have inherited negative biases about growing older just from hearing conversations. So we have to deliberately help them understand the resources that older adults bring to conversations, to expertise, and so on.
Victor mentioned stopping associating being tired with getting older.
Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. There are all sorts of things that we associate with getting older. And one of the biggest problems we have in the healthcare system, and we saw that in COVID, is not getting the care that we deserved, because it was assumed that, maybe what we were suffering from, other than COVID, was due to age. I mean, I get that from my doctor. I mean, going back to what can we do about it? I challenge her when I said I wanted to maybe start taking drugs for ADHD a year and a half ago, because my son diagnosed me as being ADHD, which she's probably correct. She said to me, Helen, whatever you have, you've lived with for 75 years. Do you really want to go on drugs now for something like that? And I said, I don't know if I do or not, but I still want to have the conversation, maybe it would be helpful. So I didn't go that route, but I'm just saying I have to constantly challenge her. I have cramps at night. She said, well, what do you expect? You're getting older. She's only a few years younger than me. And every single time she says something like that, I say, I'm sorry, that's not an acceptable response. I know I could take magnesium or something and it would help. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that we have to consciously be aware of and move forward.
Gerard mentions becoming more involved in causes that he cares about to take. Barb says she's one of 12 social entrepreneurs who were recently selected by United Way to participate in a design lab.
Great.
Over the course of 10 weeks, I have had a unique opportunity to live and advocate the reframing aging narrative. I presume that the other members of our cohort are younger than she is.
Oh, I hope she gets in touch too, because I can't read the chat, but that's great. What else do you see in there?
Doug Peck says, is it ageist to talk about older adults slowing down? Have we always been told to be fat, or have we always been told to be fast? Is fast a good thing and slow a bad thing?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you're familiar with the work by Carl Honore, I think we equate fast with young, but that's not necessarily the case. We know lots of young people who aren't. And I don't necessarily think of slow as being older, but I do think there are naturally some things that occur that do slow down, and we can't deny that either. However, I don't think that, I think our world has been moving extremely fast, and I think there is a slow movement in place. And that's really more about, being present, being mindful, enjoying the moment, which is something that everybody should be doing at every age. But I think that the closer we get to the end, the more realistic we become about appreciating a lot of things that we may not have noticed or seen earlier in life, and we take those things to heart. So I just think it's a question of personal dynamics and choices.
James mentions that he has 30 years of training and development experience, and he's been teaching mature driving classes.
Good.
To help older people save money, I guess, on their insurance premiums.
Well, it's not only that, it's also because of safety and movement and things like that. I think it's really important. In Ontario now, at the age of 70, I think it's 70 or 75 and older, we have to take exams every 2 years to prove that we can still drive. Although I don't look forward to that. In a way, I think it's a really good idea because it keeps us sharp. I do think that it's really important to remind everybody that we're beginning to name this time in life as elderhood. Finally, it's gaining a bit of traction. And elderhood really refers to, wisdom, a time in life where we've been able to internalize expertise, skill, knowledge, and that we can share that if we have the opportunity. It's also a time of, Erickson refers to it as generativity, when we want to give back. And that's what I think the person was just referring to in terms of purpose. Purpose is all important as we get older. I mean, it can be referred to as a legacy too, but the purpose doesn't have to be a big thing like, writing books or starting a new entrepreneurial activities. It can be, taking care of grandchildren if that's what you want to do, or volunteering. The reality is everyone needs to have a reason to get up. They need to have meaning in their life. This is one of the key factors with longevity. We talked about lifestyle, we talked about nutrition, sleep is extremely important, purpose is extremely essential, and it gives meaning, but it also helps with all the other factors, such as learning. I mean, you're always learning when you're giving back. You're meeting people. Social interaction is also very, very important. And I think it's for the reasons that they are recognizing today as being significant for health span, not just lifespan, and is that they're recognizing that all of these factors are as important or more important than genetics. And the thing is, we have control over them. There's another span that I like to reference, and that's joy span. Joy span means, living a fulfilled life as long as possible.
Helen, we're nearing the end, and the last question you wanted to put to the group is, what is one word or phrase that you are leaving with today? And one word is gratitude, another is reaffirming, also encouraging, advocacy. Let's see. I think that's what we have so far, and that's
I mean, I just want to encourage everybody to realize that the narrative that they may have inherited is not the real one, and that they have choice and they have control over what the rest of their life looks like, and they can change it if they want to, and they can improve upon it by doing some very, very minimal activities and steps. That the future really is very bright for our longer lives. However, we have to help others and generations that are coming behind us to understand. And so recognizing what ageism looks like and sounds like in its various forms is really significant, and you can make a difference and take to your workplace, to your community, to your family, parts of this conversation that could possibly help them change the way in which they think about growing older. And that's really what I hope that you can take away from today.
Thank you, Helen. We really appreciate the time that you've taken and the conversation that you've created and the ideas that you've sort of left us with. And we all look forward to reading the book. The book is available. There's a link in the chat. Please be aware that not just reading the book, but also leaving a comment, a review on Amazon or the various places where books are sold can really be helpful to Helen and to the book being able to reach others. This is an important message for everyone. So thank you, Helen. While Aaron is putting up the slides, I just want to remind everybody that we will be sending a follow-up email in a couple of days or so. You'll get a copy of the recording as well as information about how to buy the book, how to see Helen's newsletter, TED Talks, and so on. So all of that is coming along very quickly. A couple of announcements of things coming up. I wanted to mention that we have a new membership category that we just introduced this year. You don't have to be a professional to belong to the Encore Network. We have a new membership category called Encore Discover, and we encourage all of you to take a look if you're not already a member of the Encore Network. If you are a professional or an autograph hound, if you go to the next slide, you can join at an Encore Pro or Enterprise level and get a signed copy of Ken Stern's new book, Healthy to 100. We have an event coming up next week, a workshop on AI, and this is linked to the event that we had last month with Bob Pulver. If you are able to participate in that, This is a deeper dive. This is an opportunity to learn more about the particulars of AI, the tools that are available, the risks, how to protect yourself. We know that there are both risks and benefits, and Bob will dig into those and bring your questions. Bob is in particular interested in responding to your questions to become a more active and informed user of AI. Then on June 4th, and this links very closely to the conversation that we had today, or parts of the conversation. Aaron Alu, who is the founder of Agents of Movement, will be talking about how to rewrite your narrative about movement and exercise. A lot of us limit ourselves in terms of what we do, what we're willing to do, the risks that we're willing to take. We pull back sometimes to our own detriment. And she's going to talk about some of the things that she's found in her work that are helpful for those of us who are older to think about as we continue to age. On June 17th, we'll be having our annual Affinity Group Summit. And this is an opportunity to see our new 3-year strategy while it's still in draft form, and to both provide input to the strategy before it's finalized, but also to see how that strategy will connect to the work of our affinity groups. So for all of you who are currently involved in affinity groups, or those of you who want to learn more about our affinity groups, sign up and join us on June 17th, and also get a sneak peek into the strategy that we're working on for the next 3 years. Finally, in July, we'll be hosting a conversation with Andrew Seaman, who is the editor-at-large for Jobs and Career Development at LinkedIn. He will give us the inside view on how to use LinkedIn for job search, for job advancement, understand more about the impact of ageism on the job search opportunities for older adults. He's got the inside view, and will be in conversation with Len Lloyd of the Encore Network and talking about all things related to jobs and LinkedIn. So with that, I want to thank Helen again for an outstanding conversation today, and also thank all of you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at an upcoming session.
Thank you.